The massive chamber of Nexus Prime Station hummed with tension as representatives from 43 species filled the curved seating areas that stretched up toward the domed ceiling like an ancient amphitheater. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim, his dark suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and biosuits worn by the alien delegates around him. His hands rested calmly on the speaking podium, but his eyes held a coldness that made even the most arrogant council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "For 50 years, Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's advanced acoustics, humanity has followed every rule you have set for us. We have accepted trade restrictions that cost us billions. We have stayed within the borders you drew around our colonies. We have shared our technology freely while you hoarded yours. We have asked for nothing but fair treatment and received only contempt." Chancellor Krixmal of the Vorthak Empire rose from his elevated seat, his scaled hide gleaming under the chamber's lights. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with arms that could crush a human skull, he was an intimidating figure who had dominated council proceedings for over 2 centuries. "The young species must learn patience," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Humans have been in space for barely a century. The established order exists for good reason." "Your established order," Hyunwoo replied without raising his voice, "treats us as children while demanding we solve your problems. When the Kralian food crisis threatened millions, who developed the new growing techniques? When the Etherian plague nearly destroyed their homeworld, whose medical research saved them? When your shipping routes became clogged with inefficiency, whose logistics systems restored order? Humans, always humans, yet we are still denied voting rights in this council." Matriarch Silthara of the Etherians floated gracefully above her delegation, her translucent form shimmering with psychic energy. Her mental voice touched every mind in the chamber simultaneously, carrying undertones of condescension that made human delegates grit their teeth. "Your species shows promise, but also dangerous tendencies toward aggression and unpredictability. The Council must protect the galaxy from such instabilities." Hyunwoo smiled, and something about that expression made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. Dangerous tendencies? Which species conquered half the galaxy before being stopped by a coalition of 20 others? Which empire enslaved entire worlds for mining operations? Which civilization nearly destroyed 3 star systems in their religious wars? None of those were human, yet all of you sit on this council with full voting rights. The accusations hit their marks perfectly. Several delegates looked away in shame while others bristled with anger at having their histories thrown back at them. But Hyunwoo was not finished. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a simple data pad, holding it up for all to see. This morning, the human colony of New Busan was blockaded by Vorthak ships. The official reason given was suspicious ship movements that required investigation. The real reason: our quantum computer research was advancing too quickly for your comfort. This is the 47th time in 5 years that human scientific progress has been arbitrarily halted by council action. The galaxy must advance together, Chancellor Krixmal declared. No single species should leap too far ahead of the others. This is basic stability doctrine. Basic stupidity, Hyunwoo shot back, his calm facade finally cracking to reveal the anger beneath. You hold back progress to maintain your own positions of power. Well, we are done being held back. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began arguing among themselves, their various languages and communication methods creating a cacophony of sound, light, and psychic static. Through it all, Hyunwoo stood perfectly still, waiting for the chaos to subside. When it finally did, his next words cut through the silence like a blade. By unanimous vote of the Human Colonial Senate and the approval of Earth's united government, humanity hereby withdraws from all council treaties, agreements, and cooperative ventures, effective immediately. All human personnel will be recalled from joint projects. All human-built infrastructure will be reclaimed or destroyed. All trade relationships are terminated. We are leaving." The silence that followed was deafening. For several long moments, no one seemed able to process what they had just heard. Finally, Matriarch Silthara's mental voice whispered across the chamber, carrying genuine confusion for the first time anyone could remember. "Leaving? Where will you go? This is the only galaxy with sufficient resources to support advanced civilization." Hyunwoo's smile returned, but this time it held secrets that made the assembled aliens deeply uncomfortable. "There are other galaxies, Matriarch, billions of them, and unlike here, we will not be treated as unwelcome guests in our own home." Chancellor Crixmal laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. "This is a child's tantrum. You cannot simply leave the galaxy. The logistics alone are impossible. Where will you get the resources, the infrastructure, the knowledge needed for such an undertaking?" "We built most of your infrastructure, Chancellor. As for resources and knowledge," Hyunwoo shrugged. "We are humans. We will figure it out. We always do." At that moment, every communication device in the chamber began receiving the same transmission. Admiral Sojin Park's face appeared on screens throughout Nexus Prime, her expression stern but not unkind. Behind her, the bridge of her flagship buzzed with activity as officers carried out orders with military precision. "To all species of the Galactic Council," she began, "this is Admiral Park of the Human Deep Space Fleet. By order of the Earth government, all human ships are to withdraw immediately from Council space. Any attempt to interfere with this withdrawal will be met with appropriate force. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Through the massive viewports that lined the upper levels, delegates could already see human ships beginning to move. Transport vessels that had been docked at the station for routine maintenance were powering up their engines. Military escorts that had provided security for human diplomats were forming up into departure formations. Dr. Min-Ho Lee, who had been sitting quietly in the human delegation section, finally stood and gathered his research materials. As the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies biology, his work had been crucial to countless medical and scientific breakthroughs. Now he was calmly packing it all away. 40 years of research, commented Thex Near, his Cryelian colleague, who had worked alongside him for decades. "You are truly going to destroy all of it?" Minho looked up from his data cores, his expression thoughtful. "Not destroy, Thex Near. Relocate. This knowledge will serve humanity well in our new home. As for what we leave behind..." He paused, considering his words carefully. "You had your chance to be partners. You chose to be obstacles instead." "This is madness," Thex Near insisted. "Your species cannot survive alone. You need the Council's support, our combined knowledge, our established trade networks." "Do we?" Minho asked quietly. "Or do you need ours?" As if to answer his question, alerts began flashing throughout the station. The human-designed environmental systems were already beginning to show signs of stress without their creators' oversight. Climate control fluctuations, water recycling inefficiencies, and power distribution irregularities were appearing across multiple sectors. Hyunwoo gathered his own materials and prepared to leave the speaking podium for the last time. As he did, Chancellor Crixmal called out to him, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that had not been there before. "This cannot be your final decision. Surely there is room for negotiation, for compromise." The human ambassador paused at the chamber's exit, looking back one final time at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute finality. "We offered compromise for 50 years. You taught us that in this galaxy, might makes right and the strong dominate the weak. We have learned your lessons well, Chancellor. When we return, we will demonstrate just how thoroughly we have mastered them." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a future without the humans they had so casually dismissed. Outside the station, the first wave of human ships was already disappearing into hyperspace, beginning the greatest exodus in galactic history. Captain HFY Choi stood on the observation deck of the transport ship Incheon's Pride, watching the last civilians board from New Kyoto Station. The evacuation had been proceeding for 3 weeks now, and the efficiency of the operation would have impressed even the most critical alien observer. Every human in the inner systems was being relocated according to a plan that had been decades in the making, though few had known it existed until now. "Status report," she called to her communications officer as another group of families made their way through the airlock. 68% of inner rim colonies evacuated, came the reply. Outer rim withdrawals are 92% complete. The engineering teams are requesting another 48 hours to finish dismantling the Kepler station orbital platforms. HFY nodded, her expression calm despite the magnitude of what they were accomplishing. Moving 12 billion humans and all their possessions across thousands of light years was a logistical nightmare that would have been impossible for most species. But humans had always excelled at the impossible when necessity demanded it. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the sleek forms of alien ships maintaining what they thought was a safe distance. The Vorthak Empire had sent a battle group to monitor the situation, while the Etherians maintained a psychic surveillance net around human space. They were clearly expecting some kind of trick or last-minute change of heart. The idea that humans would actually follow through on their threat to leave seemed too extraordinary for them to believe. "Captain," her tactical officer interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving complaints from the Kralian Commerce Guild. They're demanding to know when human shipping routes will resume normal operations." HFY almost laughed. "Tell them to file a complaint with the Galactic Council. We no longer operate shipping routes in this galaxy." The communications between human and alien authorities had been growing increasingly frantic as the reality of the situation became clear. What had started as amused condescension from the galactic powers was rapidly transforming into genuine concern. The aliens were beginning to realize just how dependent they had become on human efficiency and innovation. On the planet's surface, below, Engineer Dae-hyun Yu supervised the dismantling of the massive hyperspace relay station that had served as a crucial hub for intersector travel. The station was a marvel of human engineering, capable of boosting ships across distances that would normally take months to traverse. Under Dae-hyun's direction, his teams were carefully removing every component that contained human technology or design principles. "The Vorthak representatives are getting agitated," reported his site manager. "They're claiming the relay station is joint property and cannot be removed." Dae-hyun wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his datapad. "Show them Section 12 of the construction contract. Human intellectual property, human materials, human labor. The only thing they provided was the space to build it." The contract disputes had been escalating across human space as aliens suddenly discovered that most of the infrastructure they had taken for granted was actually owned by humanity. Trade coordinator Yoonbi Song had spent years ensuring that human legal rights were protected in every agreement, no matter how minor it seemed at the time. Now that foresight was paying dividends as confused alien bureaucrats found themselves facing ironclad human claims to everything from orbital platforms to water purification systems. "Sir," the site manager continued, "they're threatening to use force to prevent the removal." Dae-hyun looked up at the Vorthak ships hovering overhead, their weapons prominently displayed. "Let them try. Admiral Park has 3 battle groups in this system, and unlike the Council races, we actually maintain our military equipment." The threat was not empty bravado. Human military technology had always been slightly ahead of galactic standards. But more importantly, human soldiers were trained to a level that made other species uncomfortable. The galaxy had seen what happened when humans went to war, and most aliens preferred not to repeat those experiences. As the relay station's main core was lifted away by heavy transport, the ripple effects began immediately. Ships that had been planning to use the hub found themselves stranded, facing journey times that were suddenly measured in months rather than days. The carefully coordinated dance of galactic commerce began to stumble as its most reliable component simply disappeared. Seokjin Nam had been monitoring these effects from his position aboard the economic analysis vessel Busan's Hope. As humanity's chief trade coordinator, he had spent decades building the systems that allowed 43 different species to conduct business efficiently. Now he was watching those same systems collapse with what he had to admit was considerable satisfaction. The Kralian markets are down 18%, reported his chief analyst. The Etherian trade routes are experiencing 72-hour delays. 3 separate shipping conglomerates have filed bankruptcy proceedings. Seokjin nodded, making notes on his tablet. What about the standardized currency exchange protocols? Failing across the board. Without human oversight, the automated systems are making increasingly erratic calculations. The Vorthak credit is fluctuating wildly against the Kralian standard. It was remarkable how quickly things fell apart when humans were not there to keep them running. The aliens had become so accustomed to human efficiency that they had forgotten how chaotic their systems had been before humanity joined the galactic community. Now they were getting a harsh reminder. On the former human capital world of New Sol, the abandonment was proceeding with typical human thoroughness. Every building, every vehicle, every piece of equipment that could be moved was being loaded onto massive cargo vessels. What could not be moved was being systematically destroyed to prevent alien reverse engineering of human technology. The Vorthak had already claimed the planet as spoils of human withdrawal, but they were discovering that claiming something and actually being able to use it were very different things. The advanced manufacturing facilities required quantum-encrypted access codes that changed every few seconds according to algorithms that only humans understood. The agricultural systems were shutting down one by one as their biological components went into programmed dormancy without proper maintenance protocols. Chancellor Krixmal himself had arrived to tour his new acquisition, accompanied by a team of Vorthak technicians who were confident they could adapt human systems for their own use. That confidence was evaporating as they encountered layer after layer of security measures that seemed designed specifically to keep aliens out. "This is unacceptable," the Chancellor declared as another facility's main computer displayed a polite message informing him that access was restricted to authorized human personnel. "Our technical specialists are among the finest in the galaxy." Technical specialist Rothok, who had been trying unsuccessfully to bypass human security for the past 6 hours, looked up from his work with visible frustration. "Chancellor, their encryption methods are unlike anything we have encountered. The codes appear to be based on quantum fluctuations that change faster than our computers can calculate. Even if we could break one system, we would have to start over immediately. Then bring in more specialists. Hire experts from other species if necessary." "Sir," Rothok said hesitantly, "the experts we need are human. They built these systems specifically to be incomprehensible to non-human minds." Meanwhile, in the deep space monitoring stations that ringed the galaxy, alien sensor operators were beginning to detect something that made no sense. Long-range telescopes were picking up energy signatures in the direction of the departed human fleets, but the readings were impossible to interpret. The scale of what appeared to be construction projects defied understanding. Physicist Velshard of the Kralian Science Institute stared at the data streaming across his screens in growing bewilderment. These energy output readings suggest massive stellar engineering projects, but that is impossible. The humans have only been gone for 2 years. His assistant, a young researcher named Kethmora, looked over his shoulder at the displays. "Could our equipment be malfunctioning?" "I have checked and rechecked every sensor array," Velshard replied. "The readings are accurate. The humans appear to be harvesting energy directly from star systems at a rate that should not be possible with known technology. The implications were staggering. If humans were capable of stellar-scale engineering projects, then their technological capabilities were far beyond what anyone had suspected. The possibility that they had been hiding such advanced knowledge during their time in the galaxy was deeply unsettling to species who had assumed they understood human limitations." On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Sojin Park reviewed the latest reports from the evacuation fleet with grim satisfaction. The withdrawal was proceeding ahead of schedule, and alien attempts to interfere had been minimal. Most importantly, the secondary objectives were being achieved with remarkable success. "Admiral," her intelligence officer reported, "the economic disruption is exceeding our most optimistic projections. Galactic trade volume is down 41% and falling. 6 major trade routes have been completely abandoned due to lack of human logistics support. And their attempts to replace our systems?" Commander Tae-young stood at the helm of the patrol ship Sol's Last as it crossed the boundary between the Milky Way and the void beyond. 2 years had passed since the Great Exodus began, and his vessel carried the distinction of being the final human ship to leave their birth galaxy. Behind them lay a civilization already showing cracks in its foundation, while ahead waited the promise of something entirely new. "All systems green for hyperspace transition," reported his navigation officer. "Course plotted for Andromeda Sector 7. Tae-young nodded, taking one last look at the galaxy that had been humanity's home for over a century. From this distance, it looked peaceful and beautiful, its spiral arms glowing with the light of billions of stars. There was no visible sign of the chaos that human intelligence reports suggested was spreading throughout the various alien civilizations. "Execute jump," he commanded quietly. The stars shifted and elongated as Sol's Last entered hyperspace, leaving the Milky Way completely empty of human presence for the first time since their species had achieved interstellar travel. In that moment, an era truly ended. The effects of human absence had been spreading like ripples through galactic civilization, touching every aspect of daily life in ways both large and small. On the former human worlds, the infrastructure that had seemed so permanent was revealing its fragility. Atmospheric processors designed by human engineers were failing one by one as their complex biomechanical systems went without proper maintenance. Dr. Eugene Kang, now living in the growing human settlements of Andromeda, received regular reports about the deteriorating conditions on worlds that had once been showcases of human terraforming expertise. 12 planets were experiencing atmospheric composition drift as their processing plants shut down in sequence. The aliens who had claimed these worlds were discovering that simply pressing buttons and following procedures was not enough to maintain systems that required intuitive understanding of biological and mechanical interactions. "The Craelians are requesting emergency technical assistance for the new Gangnam atmospheric system," her assistant informed her during their weekly briefing. "They're offering substantial compensation for human expertise." Eugen smiled coldly as she reviewed the data. New Gangnam had been one of her proudest achievements, a world transformed from a toxic wasteland into a garden paradise through careful manipulation of atmospheric chemistry and biological introduction. Now it was slowly reverting to its original state as the delicate balance she had created collapsed without proper oversight. "Send them our standard response," she replied. "The Terran Republic no longer provides technical services to Galactic Council species." The standard response had become infamous throughout the galaxy. It was polite, professional, and completely inflexible. No amount of pleading, threatening, or offering compensation could convince the humans to return and fix the systems they had built. The message was always the same. You wanted us gone, so we are gone. On Nexus Prime Station, the center of galactic government, the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The station's environmental systems had been designed by human engineers to accommodate the vastly different biological requirements of 43 species simultaneously. Without their creators to monitor and adjust the complex interactions, various sections were experiencing life support failures that threatened entire delegations. The Etherian quarters had been evacuated twice in the past month as atmospheric. Pressure fluctuations threatened to damage their delicate nervous systems. The aquatic HFY delegation was confined to emergency life support pods after the water recycling systems began producing chemical combinations that were toxic to their respiratory organs. Even the hardy Vorthak were uncomfortable as temperature regulation systems struggled to maintain the precise conditions needed for interspecies coexistence. Chancellor Crix Mal paced his private chambers like a caged predator, his massive form radiating frustration that made his staff give him an even wider berth than usual. Reports from across the galaxy told the same story of decay and dysfunction. The humans had not simply left. They had taken with them the invisible threads that held galactic civilization together. "Status report," he demanded as his chief administrator entered with the latest briefings. "Trade is down 67% from pre-Exodus levels," came the grim reply. 17 trade routes have been completely abandoned. The Kralian Commerce Guild is threatening to withdraw from the central markets entirely if shipping reliability does not improve. And our attempts to replace human logistics? Largely unsuccessful, Chancellor. Our technicians have managed to restore basic functionality to some systems, but efficiency remains far below acceptable levels. Journey times between major sectors have increased by an average of 300%. The numbers were staggering. Galactic civilization had become accustomed to the rapid, efficient movement of goods and people that human systems had provided. Now every transaction took longer, cost more, and carried a higher risk of failure. The economic impact was cascading through every aspect of life. But perhaps even more concerning were the reports coming from deep space monitoring stations. Long-range sensors had been detecting increasingly powerful energy signatures from the direction of human departure. The signals suggested construction projects on a scale that defied comprehension, involving energy outputs that could only be achieved by harvesting entire star systems. Physicist Velshard had been analyzing the data for months, trying to understand what the humans were building in their new home. The energy patterns indicated massive stellar engineering projects, but the technology required to achieve such feats was far beyond anything the galaxy had thought possible. These readings suggest they are disassembling solar systems and rebuilding them into artificial configurations, he reported to an emergency council session. The energy requirements alone would necessitate the complete conversion of stellar matter into usable forms. The assembled delegates listened in stunned silence as Velshard explained his findings. If his analysis was correct, humanity had achieved a level of technological mastery that made them effectively godlike compared to the species they had left behind. Matriarch Silthera, her usually serene mental presence crackling with anxiety, projected her thoughts to the assembly. Our most powerful seers have been experiencing visions of vast construction in the void between galaxies. The images are fragmented and difficult to interpret, but they suggest projects that span entire stellar regions. "Impossible," declared Chancellor Crixmal, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "No species could advance so rapidly. The humans have been gone for only 2 years. "Perhaps," Velshard replied carefully. "They were not as primitive as we believed. Consider the possibility that they concealed their true capabilities during their time among us." The suggestion sent waves of unease through the chamber. If humans had been hiding advanced technology while enduring decades of restrictions and condescension, what did that say about their patience and long-term planning abilities? More importantly, what did it suggest about their intentions now that they were free to act without constraint? The communication networks that connected the galaxy were also showing signs of strain without human oversight. The translation protocols. That allowed seamless dialogue between species had been largely developed by human linguists and programmers. Without regular updates and maintenance, these systems were beginning to fail in subtle but increasingly problematic ways. Diplomatic incidents were becoming commonplace as mistranslations led to misunderstandings between species. Trade negotiations collapsed when critical terms were rendered incorrectly. Military communications suffered dangerous gaps that could have led to accidental conflicts. The galaxy was slowly losing its ability to speak with itself. Captain Hyojin Lim commanded one of the automated probe ships that humanity had left behind, hidden throughout the galaxy in carefully chosen locations. These sleeper vessels had remained dormant for 2 years, their presence undetected by alien sensors. Now they were beginning to activate according to a predetermined schedule, broadcasting messages that sent chills through every species that received them. The probes emerged from their hiding places simultaneously across hundreds of star systems. Each vessel was small and unremarkable, barely larger than a civilian transport, but their synchronized appearance created a psychological impact far beyond their physical presence. The messages they broadcast were identical, transmitted in every galactic language with perfect clarity. Humanity remembers. Humanity prepares. Humanity returns when ready. The transmission lasted exactly 60 seconds before each probe activated its self-destruct sequence, vanishing in brief flashes of light that left no debris for analysis. But the message had been delivered and its implications were unmistakable. Humanity was watching, building, and planning for something that remained ominously undefined. The probe incidents triggered panic across the galaxy as species realized that humans had been monitoring them all along. If they could hide observation, platforms for 2 years without detection, what other surprises might they have left behind? Every solar system began intensive sweeps for hidden human technology, but the searches revealed nothing. President Subin Han stood in the observation dome of New Seoul Station, watching the construction of humanity's greatest achievement unfold in the space around her. 5 years had passed since the exodus from the Milky Way, and in that time, human civilization had undergone a transformation that would have seemed impossible to their former galactic neighbors. Through the transparent walls, she could see the skeletal framework of what the engineers called Project Threshold, a structure so vast that it dwarfed anything ever attempted by any known species. Status report on the Galactic Monitoring Network. She requested from her aide as she continued to observe the construction. The quantum-entangled communication arrays are functioning perfectly, Madam President. We're receiving real-time intelligence from all sectors of the Milky Way. The situation there continues to deteriorate. Subin nodded with satisfaction. The reports made for fascinating reading, though she felt no sympathy for the aliens who had brought their troubles upon themselves. The Galactic Council had fractured into 3 competing factions, each blaming the others for humanity's departure. Trade wars raged between former allies as they struggled to maintain commerce without human logistics. Most satisfying of all, technological progress had essentially stopped as species found themselves unable to maintain the research momentum that human participation had provided. Any requests for assistance or negotiation? 17 this week. Alone, Madam President. The usual pattern. Growing desperation disguised as offers of partnership. The Kralians are now offering full council membership with voting rights if we return to help stabilize their economy. Too little, too late, Subin replied coldly. Send the standard response. The standard response had not changed in 5 years. The Terran Republic acknowledged the communications, but politely declined all offers of renewed cooperation. There was no anger in the messages, no demands for apologies or reparations. The humans simply behaved as if the Galactic Council no longer existed, which in many ways was more insulting than outright hostility. Admiral Wu Jinbei commanded the massive construction project from his flagship, the Indomitable Soul. What they were building around the binary star system in Andromeda's outer rim represented 10 years of focused human innovation, freed from the ethical constraints and technological limitations that alien oversight had imposed. Project Threshold was more than just a megastructure. It was a demonstration of what humanity could achieve when no one told them something was impossible. Engineering reports completion of Section 7, his chief of staff announced. The energy collection arrays are operating at 112% of projected efficiency. Wu Jin studied the holographic displays showing the project's progress with deep satisfaction. They were essentially rebuilding an entire star system. According to human specifications, converting raw stellar matter into exotic materials that had never existed naturally. The energy requirements alone were staggering, but humans had solved that problem by learning to harvest power directly from stellar cores, using techniques that would have terrified their former galactic neighbors. Time to completion of the primary. Structure? 18 months at current construction rates, Admiral. The quantum resonance chambers should be operational within 6 months of that. What exactly Project Threshold was designed to accomplish remained classified at the highest levels, but the rumors among the construction crews were enough to make even hardened engineers nervous. Some whispered that it was a weapon capable of destroying entire galaxies. Others claimed it was a gateway to parallel universes. The truth was, perhaps more remarkable than either speculation. Back in the Milky Way, Deep Space Monitor Zenkali of the Etherian Surveillance Corps had been tracking the gravitational anomalies emanating from human space for months. The readings were becoming increasingly difficult to explain within the framework of known physics. Massive stellar engineering projects were one thing, but what the humans appeared to be accomplishing defied fundamental understanding of matter and energy. These gravitational wave patterns suggest they are manipulating space-time itself, he reported to his superiors, his mental voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic. The energy signatures indicate they are somehow folding dimensions around entire star systems. The implications were staggering. If humans had developed technology capable of manipulating the basic structure of reality, then they had transcended the limitations that governed every other known species. They were no longer simply advanced. They had become something qualitatively different from anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Astrophysicist Morden of the Kralian Science Institute had reached similar conclusions through his own analysis of the mysterious signals from Andromeda. His calculations suggested that humans were not simply building structures in space, but actually creating new forms of space itself. The technology required for such feats existed only in theoretical models that most scientists considered pure fantasy. We must present this data to the emergency council session, he urged his colleagues. The humans are no longer the species that left us 5 years ago. They have become something unprecedented. The emergency council had been in almost continuous session since the probe incidents, trying to develop some response to the growing evidence of human capabilities. But every proposal seemed inadequate when faced with the scale of what humanity appeared to have achieved. How did one negotiate with beings who could disassemble solar systems and rebuild them to their specifications? Chancellor Crixmail had aged visibly in the 5 years since human departure, his once imposing presence now marked by an anxiety that no amount of bluster could conceal. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed invincible for centuries, was struggling with internal rebellions as subject species questioned why they should remain loyal to a government that could not even maintain basic infrastructure without human assistance. "What is the status of our military preparedness?" he demanded during the latest crisis meeting. "Problematic, Chancellor," replied Fleet Admiral Gorthcool with obvious reluctance. "Our ships require extensive maintenance that we cannot provide without human technical expertise. Weapons systems that functioned perfectly 5 years ago are now operating at 60% efficiency. We estimate that our actual combat readiness has declined by approximately 40%. The military implications were terrifying. If humans returned with hostile intentions, the combined fleets of the galaxy might not be able to offer effective resistance. Their technology had always been slightly superior to alien equipment, but 5 years of uncontrolled development could have widened that gap into an unbridgeable chasm. Captain Hyojin Lim received her activation codes as she drifted, in the cold space between star systems, her small vessel indistinguishable from the cosmic debris that filled the void. She was one of 12 sleeper agents that humanity had positioned throughout the galaxy before their departure, living monuments to human patience and forward planning. Now it was time to deliver the second phase of their message. Her ship powered, up silently, its advanced stealth systems keeping it invisible to the sensor networks that alien species had deployed in desperate attempts to detect human activity. The message she was about to broadcast had been carefully crafted to maximize psychological impact while revealing nothing useful about human capabilities or intentions. "People of the galaxy," her transmission began, reaching every communication network simultaneously through quantum relays that should not have existed. 5 years ago, you celebrated our departure as the removal of an unwelcome burden. Today, you struggle with the consequences of your choices, while we have grown beyond your understanding. The message continued for exactly 3 minutes, outlining, in clinical detail, the failures and setbacks that had plagued galactic civilization since human departure. There were no threats, no demands, and no offers of assistance. Instead, there was something far more unsettling: complete indifference to alien suffering combined with casual demonstrations of impossible surveillance capabilities. We know of your failing infrastructure, your collapsing trade networks, and your growing desperation. We observe your attempts to replicate our achievements and find them amusing. You taught us that strength alone matters in this universe. We have learned that lesson well. The transmission ended with coordinates for a location in deep space and a simple instruction. When you are ready to discuss terms, send a single representative to these coordinates. Come unarmed and alone. Any deviation from these instructions will be considered an act of hostility. The coordinates led to an empty region of space far from any star system, a location that would require months of travel to reach. More disturbingly, detailed analysis revealed that the gravitational patterns in that region had been artificially altered, creating a pocket of space-time that existed according to different physical laws than the surrounding universe. Matriarch Silthara attempted to penetrate the location with her most powerful psychic probes, but her mental touch encountered something that sent her reeling in shock. There was intelligence there, vast and patient and utterly alien to anything she had ever encountered. It was recognizably human in origin, but transformed beyond easy recognition. 10 years had passed since humanity left the Milky Way, and the galaxy they returned to was barely recognizable as the civilization they had once called home. Fleet Admiral Dohun Seo stood on the bridge of the Eternal Incheon, flagship of the Terran Armada, watching through viewports that showed not space, but the fundamental structure of reality itself. The ships of the returning human fleet existed partially outside normal dimensions, their hulls forged from matter that had been convinced to follow new rules of physics. "Hyperspace transition complete," reported his navigation officer. "We have entered Milky Way space. All fleet elements reporting successful translation." Dohun nodded, his expression calm, despite the magnitude of the moment. Behind him stretched a fleet that would have been incomprehensible to the humans who had departed a decade earlier. These were not ships in any traditional sense, but rather controlled manifestations of human will made manifest in exotic matter and folded space-time. Each vessel was powered by stellar cores that had been compressed into portable singularities, their energy output regulated by technologies that treated the speed of light as a suggestion rather than a law. Alien response to our arrival? Panic. "Admiral, every sensor array in the galaxy is attempting to analyze our fleet composition. Their readings are registering impossible energy signatures and spatial distortions that violate everything they understand about physics. The return of humanity was not announced with fanfare or dramatic declarations. Instead, 3 uninhabited, Star systems simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to pure energy and stored in containment fields that occupied no space in normal reality. The demonstration lasted exactly 17 seconds, long enough for every civilization in the galaxy to witness and record the event, but brief enough to suggest that such power was trivial for its wielders to deploy. Science Director Narai Kim observed the aliens' desperate attempts to understand what they had just witnessed from her position aboard the research vessel New Busan. As humanity's leading expert on applied dimensional physics, she had overseen the development of the technologies that made such casual manipulation of matter and energy possible. The theoretical frameworks that governed these achievements would have been incomprehensible to the humans of 10 years ago, much less to the alien species who were now struggling to analyze them. Their sensor networks are overloading, she reported, with clinical detachment. The quantum signatures from our demonstration are creating interference patterns that are disrupting their detection equipment across 17 sectors. Expected response time for comprehension? Asked her research coordinator. Never, Narai replied simply. What we accomplished violates the fundamental assumptions that their science is built upon. They lack the conceptual framework to understand what they witnessed. The destruction of 3 solar systems was not an act of aggression, but rather a gift, demonstrating to the galaxy exactly how completely the balance of power had shifted. The energy captured from those systems would power human civilization for centuries, while the technology required to achieve such feats placed humanity beyond any possible threat that alien species might pose. Diplomatic attaché Sang-Woo Jung had the honor of delivering humanity's new terms to the cowering Galactic Council. He materialized in the center of their emergency session, not through transportation technology, but through direct manipulation of local space-time, his arrival, causing reality to ripple in ways that made several delegates physically ill. His appearance was unchanged from 10 years earlier, though instruments detected energy patterns around him that suggested he existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. "Representatives of the former Galactic Council," he began, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in frequencies beyond normal hearing. "Humanity has returned to claim its rightful place in this galaxy." Chancellor Krixmal, now an ancient and broken figure who had aged decades in the 10 years of human absence, struggled to maintain his composure in the face of what he was witnessing. What are your terms?" Sang-Woo smiled, and the expression somehow conveyed depths of power that made the assembled aliens instinctively recoil. "Terms? You misunderstand our relationship, Chancellor. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to inform you of how things will be." The restructuring began. Immediately. The old Galactic Council was dissolved with casual efficiency, its authority transferred to a new governing body that would operate according to human principles of logic and efficiency. Species that had ruled for millennia found themselves relegated to advisory positions, their opinions valued only insofar as they aligned with human objectives. The transformation was not accomplished through violence or coercion, but through the simple demonstration that resistance was meaningless. When the Vorthak Empire attempted to mobilize its battle fleets in a show of defiance, those ships simply stopped functioning as their engines forgot how to convert matter into energy. When the Etherian Collective tried to mount psychic resistance, they discovered that human minds had become shielded by dimensional barriers that made mental contact impossible. President Subin Han, now bearing the title of Galactic Administrator, established her headquarters on Nexus Prime Station after rebuilding it according to human specifications. The new facility existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, its architecture incorporating principles that allowed matter and energy to flow according to optimized patterns that maximized efficiency while minimizing waste. Status report on Galactic. Restructuring, she requested during her first official briefing in the former council chambers. "Resistance has ended across all sectors," reported her chief of operations. The demonstration of our capabilities has convinced even the most stubborn species that cooperation is their only viable option. Productivity is already increasing as we implement proper management protocols. The changes were dramatic and immediate. Trade networks that had been failing for a decade were restored and optimized, but now they operated according to human logic rather than the chaotic inefficiencies that had characterized alien commerce. Transportation systems were rebuilt using technology that reduced journey times by orders of magnitude while consuming less energy than the old methods. Most importantly, research and development resumed under human guidance. The scientific stagnation that had plagued the galaxy for 10 years ended as human researchers shared carefully selected advances that would benefit galactic civilization, while ensuring that no species could ever again threaten human supremacy. The world that had once been New Sol, now renamed Terra Prime, Chancellor Crixmal was given a tour of what human engineering could accomplish when unrestrained by alien limitations. The planet had been completely rebuilt, its surface covered with cities that existed in folded space, allowing billions of inhabitants to occupy areas that appeared empty to conventional observation. "This was once our capital," he said weakly, trying to comprehend architecture that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue while remaining perfectly solid. "It was never yours," replied his human guide with polite correction. "You merely borrowed it during our temporary absence. Now, it serves its intended purpose as a demonstration of what proper civilization looks like." The transformation extended beyond mere technology. Human philosophers and social scientists began implementing governance systems that eliminated the inefficiencies and conflicts that had characterized alien politics for millennia. Species that had warred for centuries found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone, their ancient feuds rendered irrelevant by human oversight. Dr. Min-Ho Lee, now bearing the title of Xenobiological Integration Coordinator, supervised the medical upgrades that were being offered to alien populations. The treatments were voluntary but highly attractive, offering dramatic improvements in health, longevity, and cognitive function. The only requirement was acceptance of neural modifications that ensured complete loyalty to human authority. "The Kralians have requested full integration for their entire population," he reported during a weekly briefing. "They cite the improvements they have observed in early volunteers." "Approved," came the response. "Prioritize species with useful skill sets. Others can wait their turn." The integration process was designed to preserve what was valuable about alien cultures while eliminating the destructive tendencies that had made their previous civilization so inefficient. Beings who underwent the treatment retained their basic personalities and capabilities, but found themselves incapable of acting against human interests or questioning human authority. Admiral Sojin Park, now elderly but kept vital through technologies that had conquered aging, commanded the final phase of galactic restructuring from the bridge of the command vessel New Incheon. Around her, human engineering teams worked to convert the galactic core itself into a massive computational matrix that would serve as the brain of the new civilization. "The core conversion is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported her chief engineer. "We estimate full integration within 18 months. Once complete, the galaxy itself will operate as a single optimized system under our direct control." The project was the culmination of everything humanity had learned during their exile.